Okay, everybody, welcome. Another fasting video for you. I want to really focus on a couple things here with the fasting. And, we're moving into the next phase. And so the next phase, we're going to step it up a notch. And so again, this whole fasting series is designed to be really an introductory program for you. Sampling some days, sampling the 16/8, sampling the 18/6 is what we're about to move into. And understanding how that feels, getting your body used to some of that, because I'm just going to tell you, if I were to make a recommendation to everybody in this clinic, it would be, I would recommend fasting on a daily basis, time restricted eating or intermittent fasting with some periodic prolonged fast thrown in there, like we're practicing. So the next phase, we're going to do an 18-hour fast, which means you're going to choose a 6-hour window. Some people choose a 12 to 6. Some people choose a 1 to 7 p.m. window. You can choose your window, whatever that might be. So 2 times a week is what I'm recommending, so you can sample it. But those of you who already want to do a daily, you're much better off. I've had a lot of people who have vacations planned, and what I'm recommending is doing some fasting before and after the vacation and kind of bookend those events. Bookend the anniversary trip, bookend the beach trip, bookend the trip to the Caribbean, or bookend the trip to wherever, one of the big national parks. So again, I'm only asking this much, but if you want to tackle more, your benefits will be cumulative and more effective. In terms of improving metabolic disease, we talked a little bit about some of the benefits with cancer and autoimmunity and diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. So at the end of this month, we're going to tackle a 24-hour fast. So those of you who are tracking with me so far, this is my last week of the first month, the 20-hour fast is coming. And so I've decided to tackle that tomorrow. So my 20-hour fast will be tomorrow. And my hours of fasting will be 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And so that's what I've chosen to do tomorrow. So 18/6 though, starting next week. If you want to tackle that every day, you can. If you want to do more than 2 days a week, feel free. Your benefits will be much greater. So remember, a couple things here is that, some of the goal here is to burn fat, and predominantly visceral fat. And there's nothing that will burn visceral fat more effectively than a fasting regimen that combines it with some proper eating and some exercise. We talked about exercising right after that fast is more beneficial in terms of burning fat, because you have some glycogen depletion. You're going to mobilize lipolysis and those fatty acids more readily, and therefore will tap into burning some of the visceral fat. You don't just burn visceral fat, right? We can't just target that. You burn globally. When we're fasting, we burn some protein, some carbohydrates, some fat, subcutaneous fat that we see on our bodies, and the visceral fat that's packed in and around our organs. So again, feeding though is critical. Feeding meaning, what do I eat after the fasting window? And so I haven't focused much on this so far, but I will in future videos, is WNF, whole natural foods, is really what we want to focus on. And so whole natural foods tend to come from the ground or the trees, plant-based nutrition. And so the data is so clear at this point that it's plants, plants, plants. And so if you eat more whole natural foods, you're going to continue to burn more visceral fat and more fat in general. If that's some of your goal, is better body composition, the exercise will help preserve some of the muscle tissue. But the other piece to this that I want to mention is something that we call a whole natural food diet with low SOS, low salt, oil, and sugar. Get your oils naturally from the avocado. Get your oils naturally from the food you eat. We don't have to pack a bunch of olive oil onto everything we eat. Is it a better oil than the polyunsaturated oils that are highly processed and prone to oxidation? Yes, it's better than that, but it doesn't mean it's a health food necessarily. So too much oil, no matter what kind of oil, can be not so good for you. So the O is for oil. Salt, limiting salt. We get plenty of salt in most of our foods. We don't need to salt and season lots of foods. And sugar, processed sugars. right? We talked about how they can really impact our inflammation pathways. increase all diseases, right? We know there's a large number of cancers that don't respond well to sugar, meaning they replicate even faster. They have extra enzymes in their cells that are glycolytic enzymes to utilize those to grow faster and stronger. So every time you eat more sugar, hopefully there's not these cells hanging around that we're feeding unnecessarily. But guess what stops that in its tracks is a fasting window, a time-restricted eating window. So oils, salt, oil, sugar. So when you refeed, that part's critical to keep these fat-burning mechanisms on board periodically and to give us some energy again for rebuilding and restructuring like we talked about in some previous videos. Here's the new piece that we're introducing this week, and that is, what about the microbiome? What about the flora in our gut? What about the bacteria? What about the 1,000 strains of bacteria that exist in my gut? That 5-pound mass of bacteria. And that's right, it's about 5 pounds worth. Its metabolic activity is significant, more than the liver. So these are organisms that are processing, eating, digesting, eliminating right there in the gut. So what you feed them will largely determine their metabolic rates and what they will excrete in your gut. And so if you eat meat, it's going to excrete different byproducts of metabolism than if you ate plant-based low SOS diets. So when you think about this, and we think about what is the best food for the microbiome and the beneficial bacteria in our gut, it's plant fibers. It's soluble plant fibers. Those are the things that feed the microbiome. Well, guess what kind of fibers are in meat, beef, chicken, fish? None. There's none in there. So why do we, plants are usually meant to garnish our plate, right? Plants are a little bit extra. The serving sizes in restaurants are offensive. You actually have to ask for double servings. So we want more plants to feed the microbiome as well. Well, what happens when we're fasting, when we're not giving the gut plant fibers and other fibers and fermented foods and other things, these prebiotics that would really nourish those bacteria that we want to flourish, is when we fast, the gut resets. There's actually a lot of these cells can die off. And so the microbiome will shrink. And then when we refeed it, what do we want to refeed it to grow the good bacteria strains and have a healthy, diverse gut microbiome? It's the plants, the whole natural foods, because that's going to have the fiber that feeds the microbiome. So very critical, guys. Fasting is a reset for your gut. So some of those of you with gut problems, fasting may help that significantly. And when we refeed, let's make sure we're refeeding it appropriately. There are some supplemental nutrition pieces that we can add to that would help the microbiome, even prebiotics that are out there, and probiotics for that matter. So, but another piece that helps the microbiome is at night, to not put food on the gut at night before we go to bed. 3 to 4 hours prior to bed, we should not really be eating. And when you think about these time-restricted fasts, it really stops you about 3 or 4 hours prior to bedtime if you design your fasting window appropriately. So think about this for the microbiome. Don't eat 3 to 4 hours before bed. Think about during the fasting that it resets, it actually kills down some of those bacteria strains. And then when we feed again, we want to feed it with good, healthy nutrition, whole natural foods, low salt, oil, sugar. And so think about that. These metabolic effects that you're getting, even if you did it twice a week, and all of a sudden at the end of the month, and you look back and you say, oh, I just did a time-restricted eating windows on 9 days out of the month, a third of the month, practically, you were engaged. If you're just following what I'm doing, if you add a few more days, the cumulative effect is better. And so, there's lots of studies now on fasting and hypertension and autoimmune diseases and lipid and cholesterol lowering and all sorts of things. So the effects are cumulative. So the more days you can, the better. And so, and remember, when we're mobilizing fat and visceral fat, fat is a primary storage for toxins and toxicants and pollutants and hydrocarbons and some of these other things. So what we want to do when we're fasting is we're mobilizing these things, which is why sometimes we don't feel as well when we're in a strong fasting window, in a prolonged fast. there's some of this detoxification taking place. We're ridding our bodies of some of this. And so detoxification gets rid of some of this because it preferentially is stored in fat. So all of these benefits are showing up, and the more we can do that, the more we turn on these detox mechanisms. And remember, exercise and sweating is also a detox mechanism. Staying well hydrated during your time-restricted eating is a detox mechanism. So just more information for you, more encouragement to say everything you're doing is good, even though it feels wrong. If you're going through some detox, potentially. So we'll talk about this again, but at this point, we're going to move on to the next phase. Those of you who are following me, maybe you're a week behind. I'm not sure where you're at with me on this. And maybe you're just sampling it periodically, which I commend you for. So good job. Hang in there. Tackle some more of this. Your body loves you for it. Love the food that loves you back. And that's what this is all about.